Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for this session on the teacher verification model for asynchronous lessons. I am Elizabeth Bennett. I teach intermediate ESL classes at Burnsville School for Adults, and I'm also a new member of the statewide distance learning team. And I've done a lot of work with helping develop the TVM training course and reviewing sample lessons and helping people get their TVM certification.
My name is Polina Huffman and I work for Metro North ABE at Blaine Learning Lab, and currently I teach ESL Level 1.
Great. And Polina uses TVM a lot in her practice, so I'm really excited to have her presenting with me this morning. Our objectives for this session, just as a warning, it's going to be pretty fast and furious. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about why we are creating TVM lessons in the first place. Then we'll spend some time talking about the role of technology in TVM lessons and think about when technology tools are or maybe are not necessary, since that seems to be kind of a sticking point that has come up in the past few months as we've been doing TVM. Then we have a sample TVM lesson plan that you will be able to read through and make some constructive suggestions for improving it. And then after the break, you will have some time to work individually or perhaps with a partner if you choose to just begin a very rough draft of objectives and activities for a TVM lesson that you could use in your own teaching context. And then you'll have time to give and receive feedback on your draft and with some other people teaching in similar contexts. We want to try to group you for that work time by your interest. So we have a quick little survey. If you could click the link in the chat and just tell us what kind of lesson you think you might want to plan today, and we will try to group you with people with similar interests. And then just remember to click that submit button at the end. So I'll give you a minute to do that.
Hello? Uh,
Hello, yes?
Hi, I don't see a link in the chat. I wonder if because I'm late, you have to put it in again, maybe? Question mark. Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you. Wait, breakout group survey?
Yeah, that's what it is. We'll have some time to work in small groups, and we want to group you according to your interest or your teaching context.
So I need to click on that right now?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
as you finish up the survey, maybe you could just type OK in the Zoom chat so we know if you're ready to continue. Okay, I'm seeing, looks like a lot of people are ready now. So in the interest of time, we'll keep moving along. I think Heather, maybe put the link in the chat one more time. It looks like maybe one or two people just joined us. But we'll keep moving along. So I thought it was important today to maybe just address the why behind TVM. There are a lot of reasons that people might want to use TVM lessons in their programs. But going with the I might say there are many reasons, but some might be better than others. Um, just a reminder, as you submit your TVM lesson title and proxy hours, once you're a TVM certified teacher, you always have to complete this Google form. And I'd like to draw your attention to a little bit of the text from that second paragraph. This form is designed for submitting details of your asynchronous, teacher-created lessons that meet adult learners' content and learning needs, where other distance learning, proxy, or contact hour pathways do not work or apply, such as distance learning, platform approval, and teacher-created courses. So basically, TVM is here as an option for you, but it's not required for anyone. And it's really designed to be an option that lets you be flexible and do whatever you need to do in your teaching context to meet your learners' needs. So let's take a moment to think about these reasons and maybe just share in the chat which reasons here, these are only 4 possible reasons that someone might use TVM, but which ones do you think are most directly supporting adult learners' needs? Thank you. I'm seeing several responses in the chat. Looks like D is a popular response. Yes, also C. Yeah, so I would agree. When I was putting this together, I think C and D might be the better reasons. Of course, I would never say contact hours are not important or you should just ignore whatever your manager is telling you. But we do want to be purposeful when we're creating our TVM lessons. And because they can be quite time consuming to create. And we don't need to just create a bunch of additional work for ourselves. So I think one of the greatest things about TVM is that it allows you to differentiate nicely. So especially reason D here, if some of your learners want or need additional practice with a skill, but the rest of the class needs to move on to other content, you could provide some supplemental instruction and practice and assessment with that skill. I would invite you to also share in the chat, what are some other reasons you create TVM lessons? How is this pathway useful to you and your learners in your context? Okay, great. I'm seeing some really nice answers in the chat. So Janine says to provide specified reinforcement for what we're studying in class. Jeremy says, I have students with inconsistent attendance, and this might be a good way to bridge the gaps between the classes they attend. Yes, I have used TVM for that purpose myself. For example, when we had a week where K-12 schools in my district were closed for conferences, so attendance in my ABE classes was not very good. So I made a TVM lesson to support those learners who couldn't attend class that week. Yeah, and Denise says when a student cannot make it to class, Amanda says it provides extra flexibility. Many teachers at our program have TVM days where students don't need to come to the building, but they have a lesson they can complete at any point over the weekend. Oh, I love that. So giving a little more flexibility both to your teachers and to your learners. Belinda says when there's limited time in person with students and more content is needed. Sherry says we've had an increase in state diploma students who want to do everything via distance learning. Yes, there might be some instances where you're doing most or even all of your teaching asynchronously. Yeah, Jeremy also says I have students who want to work at home but not online. Janice says a lot of DL options are too high or too difficult for my learners to navigate. Yeah, Janice teaches pre-lit. Yeah, so that's another really great reason to use TVM. I think you can really personalize it for your learners. And it can even feel more personal for your learners. Like instead of just watching a Khan Academy video, they can watch a screencast video of their teacher who they know. That can be really motivating for them. You can also develop material that is unique, really tailored to your class content and your cohort of learners. So thank you. I think those are all really solid lessons, really solid reasons to create TVM lessons. And just let's keep that in mind and try not to just be doing TVM for the sake of doing TVM. We want to just be very clear about our purpose. All right, so moving right along, we're going to discuss technology and TVM. I'd like you to think about this statement and the extent to which you agree or disagree. And you can put some responses in the chat if you'd like. The best TVM lessons are online and require learners to practice digital literacy skills. Okay, yeah, so the responses I'm seeing in the chat are leaning towards disagree. And yeah, I would disagree too, probably. There's nothing in the TVM framework that says it has to be online. I think that has become more and more common, especially as more people are teaching remotely and using learning management systems. It can be a really convenient way to deliver your lesson, convenient for the teacher, at least, to deliver it through a learning management system or through email or some other digital means. But it's not required. You don't necessarily have to have your TVM lesson online using technology. A couple people said that is a good way to do TVM because it is good. We do want to give our learners experience and practice with digital literacy skills. It's definitely one of the goals of ABE. One of our state standards, set of state standards has to do with digital literacy. But not every TVM lesson has to be about that necessarily. So just a couple reminders from Module 6 of the TVM certification course, which you've probably taken. I think most people in the session have taken by now. TVM lessons can include paper-based activities, online or digital activities, or a combination of both, just as long as TVM lessons are supporting Minnesota ABE content standards. So CCRS, North Star Digital Literacy, and/or ACES TIF. In other words, TVM is supposed to be really flexible. I hope that you come away from this session feeling a little more empowered, that you can use the TVM process to create lessons that really fit your learners and your instructional context. ABE programs across the state are really different. For some programs, learning management system, just post it to Google Classroom, easy, everyone can do it, that works great. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you might be in corrections where your students have no technology access, and there's nothing right or wrong, better or worse, it's just your context. So you need to do what works for you and your learners. Some advantages of using technology tools in your TVM lessons, in my opinion, would be that it's a great way to teach and model digital literacy skills, right? We want to be preparing our learners for higher education and for living wage careers. And we want to normalize using technology for learning and work. So we know our learners are going to need those digital literacy skills. This is related to racial equity. We know that not everyone comes prepared for higher education with the digital literacy skills, prepared for employment with the digital literacy skills that they will need. So we want to support our learners in that. Another advantage of using technology in TVM lessons is that if you're using like a Google form or some sort of quiz system, Polina is going to talk about Nearpod in a minute, you can provide immediate automated feedback to learners. So they don't have to wait for you to collect their paper and write your comments on it and give it back to them. They just get the feedback right away. And then you can also possibly save yourself some time. I use Google Forms a lot. I love it. I get all my results right there on one page. I don't have to mess around with papers, and it's just everything is all in one place. I love it. It works for me. So if that works for you, awesome. However, there are also some really valid reasons to remain paper-based, especially if your learners don't have access to the appropriate technology. They don't have a device that has a keyboard for typing long sentences or long paragraphs. Or maybe they don't have reliable internet access. Maybe they don't have software or apps that they need on their devices. So that's fine. You can do a paper-based lesson. Maybe you're teaching in a context where digital literacy skills aren't really the point right now. That's not what you want to focus on right now. Your lesson or your class, you have other priorities. So that's okay. And then maybe you yourself, you're feeling like maybe you need some support with digital literacy yourself, and just using all the tech things isn't manageable or helpful for you as the teacher right now. It doesn't have to be that way all the time, but sometimes I think that's okay. I wanted to show you a quick paper-based example. This was in the TVM certification webinar, but I thought it was worth bringing up again. So this lesson example uses some published resources, some science workbook pages. Very common. I'm sure we all use materials like this all the time. And it's perfectly okay to use materials like this in a TVM lesson. We just want to be careful that we do it within a context where it's part of a well-planned sequence of learning activities. You're not just making copies and handing it to students. but you're actually planning a lesson, and learners are getting instruction somehow. So I kind of sandwiched the workbook pages in between some other instructional activities. So perhaps you would have learners complete an anticipation guide, like some true or false questions about concepts that they're going to see in the workbook pages. Then maybe you prepare some PowerPoint slides, and okay, your learners don't have internet access to look at them online, but you can print them out and give them paper copies of the slides. And then after the learners have read through your slides, they complete a graphic organizer about some key vocabulary terms that you taught them about in the slides. And then after they've done the pre-work, then they would do the workbook pages. Then after they do the workbook pages, they would complete some kind of a brief reflection activity, maybe revisiting that anticipation guide and revising their answers, maybe giving examples of some key concepts or key vocabulary from the workbook pages, maybe writing a question or two that they want to be sure to ask you, their teacher. And then finally, after you've had a chance to review their written work, you would schedule a check-in conference with them to follow up on anything that they needed extra help with. And that conference could happen in person, but it could also happen over the phone or by Zoom or whatever tools you're using to communicate with your students. And just a quick note, if you're doing a synchronous check-in conference, that would be considered part of the TVM lesson, but it would not be counted in the proxy hours for the TVM lesson. You would count that as synchronous contact time somewhere else. And then another example that is kind of a scaffolding technology use. This lesson is part online and part paper-based that I created for my learners in Burnsville. We've been trying to get everyone to use Google Classroom this year, but it's been a little challenging. So I designed this TVM lesson to have an instructional video that was online. I put it on YouTube so they could just click a link and watch it. Then they had a little bit of writing practice, and then they took an online quiz. And I intentionally, when I posted it to Google Classroom, you can copy and paste the links to a video or a Google Form quiz or whatever you want right in the instructions for the learners in Google Classroom. And then it automatically, after you post it in Google Classroom, it sends an email. So my learners got all of this information right in their email. And they could actually complete the entire TVM lesson without even having to log into Google Classroom. I've had to really focus on email use and clicking the link to join Google Meet. So this was kind of an extension of that. You know, you open your email and you can click the link to complete these activities. And then for the writing portion, I just gave the learners a piece of paper when they were with me in class to take home and do the writing on paper. Many of my learners are still using phones rather than computers. It's really hard to type on a tiny phone screen, so I just gave them a piece of paper for the writing portion. Polina, is there anything in the chat that we should address at this point?
There was a question if a Zoom or Google Meet would fulfill the requirement of the assessment. And yes.
Yeah, you can definitely have a synchronous conference with your learners. That's a great informal assessment technique.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. I'll turn it over to Polina now, and she's going to share an example of a TVM lesson using Nearpod.
Hello. I'm going to quickly talk about Nearpod. And the reason I have been using it is, of course, we have all been teaching online. And I thought my Google Slides during a Google Meet were just fantastic. And then I realized that I'm not sure what my students are learning. And so then I came across Nearpod, which gave me the idea of the hands-on experience for the students. which before in the classroom was pulling a tub of things and asking them to do some matching, some great hands-on stuff. And I could not do that over a Google Meet. So Nearpod was a lifesaver for me and for my students. Elizabeth, if you could go to next. Nearpod works with Google Slides. You can create your Google Slides and then beef them up with Nearpod activities, or actually create slides in Nearpod. And I believe that almost everybody has access to Nearpod through their schools. If not, maybe ask your supervisor. It is free up to a point of how many lessons you have created. There is storage that they would charge you for afterwards if you have exceeded your free space. The nice thing about Google Nearpod and working with Google Slides, and if you could go to next, is that they offer a whole bunch of things that you can add to your lesson. One of them is content. And if you think about it, anything that you want to add, maybe such as a video or a slideshow, you can add an audio. I know a lot of students who struggle with reading would benefit from actually hearing the instructions that you embed in your lesson. So Nearpod allows you to do that. You can also add, and this would be next slide, to add a lot of activities such as matching, fill in the blanks. You can do drawing. I do actually use Draw It a lot with my students because they're so low and can maybe not explain their thinking. So this is a great way of them to show that they are participating. When I was presenting Nearpod to my coworkers, everybody was like, well, this is a lot of work. A nice thing about Nearpod, and if you could go to next slide, Elizabeth, is that Nearpod knows that everybody's already busy. And yes, we're trying our best. But if you go to Nearpod library, they have hundreds of lessons, activities, and videos that you can search. You can search their lessons by standards. So you could do, they do not have CCRS, but they do have Common Core. You can search by the state, you can search by the subject or grade. So Elizabeth, if you could advance to the next one. This is an example of searching by the standard, the subject, and the grade. And I just did the search by lessons. Next, please. You can narrow your search by, say, the activities. I just want the activities. I will do the teaching myself, so to speak, by the subject and the grade. And then next, you can also just search for videos. And the nice thing about the videos in Nearpod, you can edit them and make them interactive, where the students are not just watching them, but actually watching 10, 15 seconds of each video. And then there's a question that they can answer. Could be a multiple choice, could be draw it, could be a poll, anything like this, where you can see immediate feedback of what is happening. Next, please. The nice thing about Nearpod is that they offer two things that you can do. And this is how I started. I did not start with TVM right away. I wanted to see how students will take this in an online setting. So Nearpod offers live participation, where you can launch the lesson right there and see exactly who is doing what and how are they doing and how much time it takes. And then I realized, and that was one of the reasons why I started using this as my TVM, is a lot of students need more practice. They need their time, they need their personal feedback that you cannot provide in a live session. So the nice thing is that you can do student-paced lesson, and this is the one that I use for TVM. Next, please. And this is where you can set, do the settings of how much time students have. Are they required to answer every question? Can they skip to the next activity or not? And the nice thing is, I know a lot of people, a lot of teachers use Google Classroom. You can post it onto your Google Classroom. Students can always have access to that. You can email them the link. For my students, we use Remind. So this is how I let them know about the lesson. When they are working on the lesson, next slide, please. My view is different from theirs. They see activities, they see options, they see things that I'm asking them to do on my end, and this is the teacher view. I can see how many students are participating, what it takes them longer, how I can help them. So I think one of the things Elizabeth said, that it saves time because it provides that automated response. It does do that, and I love Nearpod for it, but it also gives me exact idea of how each of my students is doing and how I can help them get through this. So for Nearpod, Elizabeth, next please, of why Nearpod lesson would be a good TVM approved lesson is, yes, I am communicating directly to my students of what I'm expecting them to do and how long and what is the due date. I can see their work in progress. I can see what they're doing, if they're doing anything, so then I can direct them to the lesson, explain maybe the activity that they're stuck on. And then I can look at the report provided by Nearpod to see who has completed the lesson and then log it into my TVM log, or guide students through this and tell them more about the activity that maybe they got stuck on and then decided to quit after. So, and one more thing, if you have never ever even heard of Nearpod or have never looked at it, try it just once. And I think if you start with the teacher resources that they already have in their library and just go from there, you might like it, and your students will like it a lot.
Thanks, Polina. Yes, I see Mary Beth says in the chat, sounds similar to Pear Deck and Edpuzzle. Yes, it's very similar to Pear Deck, and I think it shares some similarities with Edpuzzle as well. Edpuzzle is all about videos, so you can create your own video or use an existing YouTube video and insert questions in it. And I would just say, as far as the paid subscription, if you're part of a K-12 school district, check and see. You may already have access to the paid version. I was pleasantly surprised to discover that I had access to Pear Deck, all the fancy features, through my school district already. So we will move right along. Polina is going to talk about the sample lesson activity.
We are going to do a little bit of a hands-on experience for you guys where we will chat out in just a minute lesson plan that was submitted. And what we are hoping for you to look at and see, is this a good TVM lesson? Will this be something that you can use and something that the TVM approval group will say, yes, you're good, you can count your hours for it. The lesson, yes, thank you, Heather. The lesson was based on the standout textbook that a lot of ESL teachers use in their curriculum. And the yes, those are the pages that are there, and the story from Literacy Minnesota that supplements the unit that is being covered in class. And I believe this is next, Elizabeth. Before we go into the breakout rooms, it is important that you download the lesson plan, because otherwise when you're in the breakout room, you will not be able to see it. So if you could click on the link that Heather chatted out a minute ago. And when you do have it, if you could make a copy of it so you can
If you
write
would like to have your own
Yeah.
copy to write.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you can use the file menu in Google Docs, and you can make a Google Doc copy if that is something you do regularly.
Mhm.
Or if you're not a Google Docs person, you can just choose download and download the Microsoft Word or whatever format of your choice.
Mhm.
And there's also a Jamboard for you to put some responses on.
Yes, and if you're not familiar with the Jamboard, so this is the slide that is initial, and there are 3 questions that we're asking you to think about is, what is good about this lesson plan? What is not so good about this lesson plan? And what is one suggestion that you could make to make it better? As you can see, when you go to the next one, we have set it up in groups. So if you click on the sticky note itself, click on edit, you can type in your response right there and make sure that you click on save, the blue button, so your response is there. And then if you could just, you do not have to type much, just what is something that you see is great to keep, something that can be changed, in one suggestion to make it TVM approved. And I would think maybe we would want to, instead of keeping group 1, if you could click on that yellow sticky note as well, and maybe put your names so that we know who wrote that, that would be great.
And then we'll take about 10 minutes.
Yes.
So make sure you have the Jamboard open. Your room number, your group number is the same as your breakout room number as soon as we launch the breakouts. And then make sure you have the sample lesson plan. And then we will come back together in about 10 minutes.
All right, welcome back. It looked like you guys were busy. Nobody had questions for us. Elizabeth and I were just waiting. So that's great. Before we go on break, if we could quickly get some feedback from what you guys have discussed. And the first question that was on your Jamboard, if anybody is willing to share through chat, well, what is something that maybe your group was not particularly fond of? Is there anything that you thought, this will not be a good TVM lesson? If you could chat it out, and then Elizabeth, if you can help me read those. Yes, everybody looked at the same lesson plan. That is correct, Adam. So again, the question is, was there anything that you thought is okay to call a TVM lesson plan? Okay, all right. Thank you. Denise says we had a hard time finding any instruction happening. It seemed fairly labor intensive with the amount of standards listed. Very good. Yes, a lot of standards were listed, but then there was lack of instruction, just worksheets, no clear lesson plan. That is absolutely correct. Yes, and I do agree with lots of standards, and nothing was really addressed in the lesson itself. Jeremy says emailing the story to students that don't get a hard copy could be time consuming. Might work better to have the story posted online somewhere for student access. Absolutely. Yes. Adam, do you have a question? I see that you have raised your hand.
No, I wanted to answer verbally instead of in the
Oh,
chat.
yes, please do.
Okay, so you're asking for stuff that could be improved right now, right? Like stuff that was not so good.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
something
so-
not
I'm sorry, I
good.
had to step out for a second. So our group said the main thing for us was no directions for students on how to complete the online version, when to complete it by, what to do if they have questions, how to contact the teacher, when they could contact the teacher. No, so there's no directions for students at all. So that's a key piece. If you're going to email students just a link without any context, that's just a bad idea.
Thank you. Now, if we go to the second question that we had, was there anything worth keeping? And then maybe adding on to it. And Sherry, I see your question. We'll answer that in just a minute. So again, the question is, was there anything worth keeping in the lesson plan and maybe adding to it? I understand a lot of people said we would need to add instruction. Using Google Forms as an assessment tool. Okay, yes, I would agree. And if you set it up the right way, Google Forms could give them feedback right away. The TVM lesson plan template is great. Yes, absolutely. And you will have, all of us have access to it through Atlas. Very good. Yes, yes. And I think Elizabeth mentioned that earlier in the presentation as well. Yes, we want to make sure that all your TVM lessons are aligned with CCRS, TIFF, and North Star. But you just don't want to, as somebody mentioned before, just to list them. You actually want to see them embedded in your instruction to the TVM lesson and in the activities that the students are working on. The flexibility to complete it 2 ways. Yes, and just like, yes, Adam said, Susan is saying almost the same thing, that yes, either paper, pencil, or digitally, depending on how it works for them. Yes, thank you. All right. All right, I think we are going to go ahead and take, oh, yes. Mary Beth says, I'm interested to hear how to make this lesson better. Well, this is something that we will work on after break, Mary Beth. You will be in the breakout group again to work on that. If you want to, you can choose to actually work on that lesson to make it better, and maybe your colleagues can help us reach that goal. Yes, and Susan says the content is fine, level appropriate. Yes, if we're kind of shooting for the ESL level 2 again, it could mean different things for different programs. It should be level appropriate. Yes. All right. Just like I mentioned, we are going to take a 10-minute break. And then when we come back, we are going to work on a rough draft of a TVM lesson plan. So Elizabeth, if we can do the countdown. All right, thank you.
Hello, welcome back. So the biggest chunk of this workshop is truly a workshop. We're going to give you time to work individually and with the members of your group. We're a bit behind the schedule, but I think it will still be okay because it ended up that most breakout groups only have 2 or 3 people instead of 4. So we'll give you about 15 minutes to just work on your own you can you'll be in your breakout groups, but you can turn your cameras and microphones off and just work independently. And then around 10:40, we'll send you a message that it's time to start talking with your group mates if you haven't already. If you prefer, since you are grouped by similar levels and content areas, if you prefer to work together with another person or with all of the people in your group to plan a joint lesson, that's perfectly fine. Feel free to do that. It's your time to use in whatever way is most helpful to you. We just want to make sure that everyone has time to share what they are thinking about and get some feedback from the other people in the group. For the workshop time, I've created a document that has some guiding questions about beginning to plan a TVM lesson. So I'll just show you this document here. So we have guiding questions on the first 2 pages, and then we just have a blank copy of the template on the rest of the document. So if you prefer to just use the familiar template that you've used before, perfectly fine. You can start just typing in that. Although obviously we're not giving you enough time to really complete the full template. So I would recommend just focusing really on the first part, the topic and content, the objectives, what materials you might use, and what the instructional review, practice, and assessment might look like. We don't expect you to actually have all of your materials put together during this workshop. However, it may also be more useful to spend your time thinking about these guiding questions on the first 2 pages. Kind of what we talked about in the first part of this session. So why do you need to make a TVM lesson in the first place? Let's make sure that you have a very clear idea of the purpose. Why are you making a TVM lesson? How is this going to be helpful to you and your learners? And then also, let's spend some time thinking about the technology tools and digital literacy skills, both for yourself and for your students. So how do you, as the teacher, want to use technology as you create this lesson? And do you have the skills, the know-how, the experience, the software, whatever other materials you might need to do that? If not, where could you get help? Where could you find some resources for yourself? And then what technology will your students need in order to access the lesson materials and complete the lesson activities? When did your students or when will they learn to use this technology? And what will happen if some students don't have access to the needed technology? In addition to technology, the stuff, the devices, internet, whatever that they need, also think about which digital literacy skills are students going to need in order to access the materials or complete the activities. And then same thing, when did or when will the students learn those skills? And what supports will be available to students who might struggle? And then you can also just think through the instruction, practice, and assessment pieces. And one other very important question, this comes up a lot as I'm reviewing sample TVM lessons that people have submitted. How will you be able to verify that students completed all parts of the lesson? So I believe the Google Doc link is in the chat already. And just like the first Google Doc, you can either make your own copy in your Google Drive using the file menu, or you can use the file menu to download a copy in the format of your choice. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand or type them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll give you time to work. Polina and I are here. There is a help button that you can use in Zoom. Of course, there are only 2 of us, but we'll do our best to come to your breakout rooms if you would like some assistance. So I think we're ready to start the breakouts. Hello again. So thank you for participating in this workshop. I hope your time in small groups was helpful. In reviewing the feedback from the TVM certification webinars, that seems to be the theme, that people really want time in small groups to discuss their lessons and receive feedback. As we wrap things up here, we just wanted to share a few resources, and these are all linked in the slides. And there will be a PDF available of the slides with all the links in the participant folder a little bit later today. Just for general reference, remember there is a TVM page on the Minnesota website. You're also welcome to review Module 6 or any of Modules 1 through 5 of the distance learning and TVM online course that you took to become TVM certified. There's a recording of the TVM overview session from Summer Institute. And then there are several example lessons. So Polina's Nearpod lesson plan that she shared today is linked. Polina also uses quizzes in TVM. So that's linked here. And then there are some links to the slides from TVM lesson showcases at the November conference and also from Summer Institute last year. Draw your attention to the Summer Institute lesson showcase includes another paper-based example from Megan Himes. So really nice example of a paper packet. And of course, at any time you are welcome and encouraged to contact the distance learning support team with any TVM questions. The email address is ridiculously long, but it's support@mnabedistancelearning.zendesk.com. And we look forward to continuing to work through TVM with you. Lindsay put some suggestion in the chat about the networking coffee breaks and also links to the flyer. I see there's 1 or 2 questions in the chat, so we can stay on for a minute or 2 and talk with people individually. Otherwise, thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.